Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. It is Saturday, the 23rd of November, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. How you doing, Phil?
I'm okay. Caught you a bit short there, but yeah, we've got a few this week, and we are recording a little bit early this week, but I think we've definitely got a week's worth of headlines, haven't we? In the already, I think we've had to be fairly selective, I think, because it's been very much a news week, should we say.
Yeah, it looks like it's been really busy out there. So headlines this week, the first two stories are linked because they both involve Sytner. So Sytner's selling 4 VW sites and is selling a Seat site as well. So we'll look at those. We've got Cambria's year-end results, which last week we were talking about it's good to have some upbeat stories. This is certainly an upbeat story. So we'll look at that. Imperial Cars are expanding. They're opening a new site in Wembley. There's a new report on dealer profitability, which isn't so good because it indicates that 1 in 5 dealers are now in the red. We've got an update on the Q3 used car sales from the SMMT. And finally this week is it's not a funny one. It's just a look at what will be a rather significant car from Ford, which I think we touched on last week, actually, when we were interviewing Stuart Fold. So there's a bit more detail on that particular car.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned there, I mean, what a great interview last week with Stuart. I mean, if you want to know what's happening in terms of the ambitions within the Ford network, and particularly with Trust Ford, just listen back to that interview. I think a very comprehensive and very insightful interview there with Stuart from Trust Ford.
In fact, it's worth catching the first 10 minutes or so, and you don't even have to listen to our sort of ramblings afterwards, because it was very good. And you're absolutely right. It gave a really good insight into what's happening, not just in the Trust Ford network, but Ford generally. So, do revisit that. It's available on all good platforms, isn't it? From Spotify to Deezer to iTunes and all the others.
And we have had confirmation this week that we do get listeners on Deezer, don't we, as well? That there is a following of Deezer. So hello to those guys listening to Deezer this morning.
Yeah, the Deezer geezers.
That's the one. So before we start putting our caps on backwards and getting our plimsolls out, Curtis, quite interesting you talk about the Ford network and investment in the UK and the growth opportunities in the UK. And we have touched on the VAG restructuring that they've announced a couple of times, and it's been talked around on this podcast and in the media. But we've had news this week that Sytner are selling 4 VW sites and will close one other VW site, and that's the story in AM Online. And that's where Johnson's Cars, who I know the guys there at Johnson's Cars, are buying those dealerships in Liverpool, Warrington, Stafford and Stoke. And that's going to take them up to, I think, was it 10 dealerships, if I correctly?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So that's, you kind of a bit of a restructuring, but they are shutting their VW franchise in Halifax, Sytner's as well, and that's going to be closing at the end of the month, and that will leave them with 4 remaining VW dealerships in Yorkshire, 2 in Northern Ireland and 1 in Wales. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, now it is an interesting one, this, and you're right. It does follow on from our coverage a couple of podcasts ago on what's happening in the VW network, where Volkswagen's looking at its distribution in the UK and indeed across Europe, and it wants to sell more units from fewer dealerships. So what we're seeing at the moment are some of the bigger groups shuffling their packs a bit. So, looking long term about their VW representation. And of course, this actually follows Inchcape selling 5 VW sites a few months ago to Group 1. So I think we can see more of this activity. Interestingly, Sytner, so they've, as you say, they've sold 4 sites, they're closing 1, but they will still have representation with, I think it's 6 sites. They'll still have 6 VW sites on their books.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, it's a great move from Johnson's. It increases their portfolio of VW. I mean, you know, the last significant acquisition from Johnson's was the Ford dealerships when it bought 4 dealerships, Chambers and Alex Lorry businesses back in 2017, and then this year it acquired the TH White, taking it to 46 sites in England. So again, showing the growth of Johnson's and the investments from Johnson's there, but unfortunately, like you say, the restructuring of some of the VAG representation and in particular Sytner's there in the UK. So I think you're right. I think there's first of many, I think, to come on this one, and we did talk about that, didn't we, the other week?
We did, yes. Now, next headline, also from AM Online, is Pentagon acquires Sytner's Seat dealership in Huddersfield. So this is, a straight disposal story. So Pentagon is acquiring that site, and the latest purchase by Pentagon actually follows the acquisition. This goes back a couple of years now. They were acquired by South Africa's biggest car retail group, Motors Core, and since then they have pretty much been on the acquisition trail. So they bought 3 sites from Truss Ford, they bought a Vauxhall dealership from Archie Moss, and 2 Peugeot sites earlier this year. So this is really showing Pentagon making the most of their funding and growing. They are actively growing the group, and they've got quite a wide spread now across East Midlands, the Northwest, South Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. So that's 50 sites they've got now. Yeah,
and as you say, I mean, the acquisition took place on the 19th of November, and that takes the total representation with the brand to 4 sites, with Huddersfield joining existing dealerships in Oldham, Scunthorpe and Nottingham there. So again, kind of you can see this growth and this realignment of partners of the manufacturers and the groups at the minute starting to happen, can't you? So again, you just feel that there's more to come before the end of the year, don't you?
Yeah, and it's also interesting that it's SEAT because, of course, SEAT are doing rather well at the moment. Sales in the year to date are up 9%, and that's really, I think, on the back of their move into crossovers and SUVs. They were late to the party, but they've certainly made up for lost time because those vehicles are selling very, very well.
Exactly, and as we're talking about re-franchising and restructuring of franchises and things like that, the next story, again still in AM Online, is that Cambria luxury car sales switch delivers 2018-2019 results of success. And I think when you start looking at some of the results on this, and a couple of the media stories have picked up that it's not all about volume, that they have actually dropped both new car sales and used car sales in terms of year-on-year volume, but increased profitability in both the new and the used car market. So again, Cambria have demonstrated that actually by realigning some of their franchise representation, investing in some of their property development as well, that actually they can turn and focus on the profit. And they've talked about new car volumes reducing by 18%, but actually increased by 2.7 million in terms of profit, and used vehicles were down 4.9%, but the PPU was up. So again, a good demonstration of what they can do in a challenging marketplace.
Yeah, and this looks as though a lot of the turnaround here has come from new Bentley, Lamborghini, and McLaren showrooms, which have opened over this period, which have helped it to increase its profits by 37.4% before tax. So the figures are group turnover rose 4.4% to 657.8 million. So that's up from 630 million last year, and this is for the period up to the end of August. Profit before tax, as we said, was up 37.4%, and that's now to 12.5 million compared with 9.1 last year. But the figure that really stood out for me was the 40.3% rise in average profit from each vehicle sale. So, I refer us back to Bentley, Lamborghini, and McLaren. That is astonishing.
Yeah, and they talk about the improved franchise portfolio mix and the reduction in lower margin fleet and commercial units is what they've talked about there. And again, new car gross GP increased by 2.7 million, as I said earlier. So again, great result from these guys, and they do refer to their investment and addition of new HLS brands. Which for those not in the know, what is it, Curtis? I'll let you have the pleasure of this one.
Well, I would say that's high luxury sports.
So again, looking at that Lamborghini sector and everything else there, I mean, it shows that these guys are rebranding, restructuring their business, looking at their brand proposition and portfolio. But again, they do highlight some of the challenges and the headwinds in a weakening consumer demand and around the uncertainty in the political environment. And some of the challenges is they highlight, and some of the media this week did pick up on that around the manufacturers with the CO2 emission compliance, and we've talked about that on the podcast a number of times, looking ahead into 2020 and 2021. So I think some of that will be some of the reasons why they have looked at their portfolio realignment as well.
Yeah, and in fact, Chief Exec Mark Lavery reflects on this in this piece, because he says how this time last year the group was telling the sector that they'd be shutting businesses, taking on new franchising, and as you say, moving into that HLS space. And 12 months ago, that may have looked like a gamble, but boy, has that paid off for them.
Yeah, it's a fantastic result, they say, with and true testament that actually that in combination with some of the re-strategies and the reduction in volume, they can still turn an increase in profitability across the new, used and after-sales markets that they operate within. So again, great result for these guys.
Yeah, and also taking on these franchises, it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. And Mark Lavery says that conversations with Bentley started in 2011 and Lamborghini in 2010. So this has been a slow burn for them, but it's worth the time they've invested in it.
Yeah, again, the board is positive about the trade in the current climate, that they've had a good start to the board expectations, and it does make a comment that the board remains confident that Cambria's resilient business model, enhanced with the franchise portfolio focus on delivering a super guest experience and financing arrangements, leaves it well positioned to take advantage of any opportunities that the current economic uncertainty will provide. So again, kind of a hint there that there's potentially more to come if the opportunities do present themselves.
So next story is also from AM Online. It's been a busy old week for AM Online. The headline is Imperial Cars invest in brand new Wembley site. So this is about Southampton-based Imperial Cars, the supermarket group. They've invested in opening a used car supermarket in Wembley, and that's actually the former Mercedes-Benz Park Royal site, which is on the North Circular. It's a big site with space to display 100 vehicles. So this actually takes Imperial's network up to 15 sites. So they are growing, and we've reported on Imperial before because they opened a prep centre fairly recently in Bristol as part of the expansion. But this is part of their ongoing plan to add sites and take on more of a sort of national spread.
And it's interesting because we've talked recently, obviously, about the Pendragon in their plans. Obviously, what happened in terms of shutting the car stores, and we were sort of saying recently about that growth of the supermarket seems to have slowed a little bit as the UK continues sort of face headwinds, and obviously the stock supply has slowed down, but we'll get some more into that shortly. But again, showing growth of these supermarkets, particularly within that, like you say, that northern M25 territory there in London. So again, giving choice within that M25, and it'd be interesting that in terms of stock profiling and things like that, because reports are that with the Dieselgate and the challenges around emissions awnings, etc. in London, that some of these supermarkets do have to think very carefully about their stock profiling within that M25 territory.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And their location on the North Circular, of course, that's where the ULEZ will be extended to fairly soon. So their stock profile will be absolutely crucial. If they can stock EVs, hybrids, and petrols, then they've got a very good catchment there.
Exactly. And on the next story, moving over to motortrader.com, and this is a report from BDO, the financial analysts, and this is that the new report reveals 1 in 5 dealers are in the red, and this is an annual report, and I think you probably remember looking at this report when you were with Motor Trader, don't you? And this is their Motor 150 annual Motor 150 report that they produce, and looking at the financial health of the top 150 motor retail businesses.
Yeah, it's an interesting bit of research, and I'd urge anyone listening to maybe go over to the BDO website to see if they can download the report, because the coverage in Motor Trader isn't that detailed. There's a lot more in the report, but as you say, it's the 150, so that falls somewhere between the Motor Trader top 200 and the AM 100. So you see what they've done there, Phil.
Yeah, just make it a little bit of a differentiator there.
Yeah. But yeah, as you say, it's the report finds that 1 in 5 companies in the 150 made a loss, and that's actually twice as many as the previous years. And the other interesting aspects that's identified in the Motor Trader report is that the sort of gap between the top 75 and the bottom 75 isn't as pronounced as it has been in previous years, because the top 75 were achieving better results because of the higher turnover, more profitability. But that, according to BDO, is no longer the case. So that gap is closing.
Yeah, and they're talking here, don't they? Because we're going to talk about the Q3 used car performance, but it said that Brexit and the economic uncertainty, rapid technological change and changing consumer attitudes have all contributed to a 6.8% fall in new vehicle registrations and a 2.1% in used car registrations. It's interesting how they say registrations. I've seen that a couple of times recently around used cars and referring to them as registrations rather than transactions. And really, they are transactions.
They are, aren't they? There's no hiding place there. They have been sold.
So again, we'll get onto that in a minute in terms of the Q3 performance. But I mean, they're referring to a fall of 6.8% in new car registrations, whereas we know that I think the year to date is 2.92. Year to date fall in new cars. So again, it's interesting now looking at that 150 gives a different view on the new used car market away from the entire UK market.
Yeah. So let's talk about that used car market, shall we?
Yeah, and I think we sort of mentioned it briefly last week around the new and used car forecast for 2019 and the strength of the market. But again, I think we've come out that the SMMT have come out with the Q3 results, which they tend to come out on about the 13th of the second following month, I think, so 13th of November for Q3, and they've come out as an increase, a slight increase on year. So again, I think personally we had a strong Q1 and Q2 with just over 2 million transactions in both them quarters. And again, like I say, 0.92% up year on year for Q3. So we finished on 2.076 million in 2019 versus 2.057 million the year before, whereas actually the year before dropped slightly by 2%. And the year before that again was a 2%, so not quite to the numbers that we've seen back into 2015-16. I mean, if you look back to 2000 and I think it's 2016 there, that 2.1 million were done in the third quarter. So we have dropped. It dropped from 2.148 to 2.102, and then we're just above that 2 million now. But I think it's still a fairly strong performance for the sector so far.
Yeah, what stood out for me in this, so in Q3, demand for EVs, hybrids and diesels were actually up in the quarter, and petrol was marginally down. So interesting there, because we obviously talk a lot about diesel on the podcast, but in the used car markets, that demand is actually up, certainly up in Q3.
Definitely, I think that's the bit that we keep trying to highlight, that although we see what's happening in that new car market, we see the growth of hybrid and EV, but actually as a used car, still the dominance of the diesel still exists, doesn't it? And I suppose that will do for the short term. So
yep.
we are moving.
So Phil, in a word, Q4 up or down?
Well, it'll hinge on our forecast of 7.9 million, 7.794 million used car transactions for the year. So to stay on track for the forecast that we've done at Cox Automotive with myself, I need the results coming at 1.7 million. So we are forecasting a slight dip, but only a very slight dip in the fourth quarter. But I think it'll still be a good result.
Yeah, so year to date, taking in Q3, it's down 0.8%. So the full year might be slightly down on that.
Yeah. We forecast a 1.9 decline for the full year. Yep. So we are expecting a further slight decline in the fourth quarter, and we can see that with some of the supply constraints. But again, still a strong market generally. I think 7.8 million used car transactions will be a strong, resilient year for the used car sector in the UK.
Yeah, and finally,
yeah, this is now you had the pleasure of being at the Trust Ford conference where you got sight of this, but this is on BBC News, and this is that Ford unveils the all-electric car, the Mustang Mach-E. I don't know, do you think they get away with that Mustang badge? Is it? I mean, it's still the Mustang badge at the end of the day.
You know what? This is a brilliant piece of marketing because you slap the Mustang badge on a car and it's instantly desirable. I actually think the car looks really good. The image on the BBC website isn't brilliant, but there's quite a good TV campaign showing the sort of classic Mustangs and building up to this one, which is it's a crossover. It's an SUV. It's all electric, and it puts Ford unexpectedly in sort of Tesla territory because in terms of pricing, performance, and Ford let's be honest, they were late to the EV party, so this will help sort of kickstart their move into EV. They're doing a lot of work on the commercial side with plug-in hybrid transits, in fact, and mild hybrid cars, but this one will give them a halo car. And you mentioned the Trust Ford event. There's a lot of excitement in the network around this. They can't wait to get into their showrooms. We saw a teaser video of it, but I don't think we'll be seeing the car in the UK for a little while yet.
No, and you made a good point earlier that I think, talking to Ford dealerships over recent years, and they kind of came into the EV sector and then exited it, and there was always this question of the dealers themselves felt that they were being left behind around in that sort of growing sector, and there was a bit of concern that they weren't moving with the growth of other manufacturers and their investment into future EV technology. But I think you're right. I think they've come straight in. I mean, they talk about the top range version with a range of 370 miles on the full charge and 57 on a recharge. So again, if they can get anywhere near that, I know there's a lot of questions about these numbers quoted from other manufacturers and things like that. Trying to get. I was talking with someone who has a Tesla the other day, and they were challenging some of the quoted distances. But again, if they can get anywhere near that, even if it does fall short, you are entering into a space of that removal of range anxiety. A lot of people can do, a daily commute easily well within that sort of 300 to 350 range, can't they? So again, it puts them straight in to that current range sector, puts them straight in with talking about the prices from 44,000 to 58,000 in the UK compared to obviously the US equivalent. But again, goes straight in against the Tesla Model X market, where they're obviously quoting a lot of the statistics about. So again, it's got a 15.5 inch touchscreen beside the steering wheel. So again, straight up against the Teslas that we've seen so far. So, and an added bonus, you've got a Mustang badge on the front of your grille as well.
Yeah, and 0 to 60, worth pointing out, in under 5 seconds. So that's pretty much in line with the Tesla Model X. And interesting, I noticed Ford have already put a configurator on their website. So anyone interested in this car can actually go online and play around with colours and spec, and no doubt put down a deposit as well. Yeah,
again, great. Be interested to see when we get to see it in the flesh in the UK in some form or another. But and your question, is it the right thing to do with putting the Mustang badge on it? We know that the Mustang has done really well recently with the re-entrance into the UK market there. So possibly the right thing to do. It gives that differentiation against the rest of the Ford range and starts to build that Mustang brand further in the sector. So possibly the right thing to do.
Yeah, I would say definitely the right thing to do, and it would have been such a missed opportunity if they hadn't. Okay, it doesn't look like a Mustang, but it's an all-electric car. It's you can't have the sort of classic muscle car powered by an electric motor. It's got to evolve. It's got to move on.
Yeah. If you want a Shelby 500, then on a 67 plate, then get your hands in the pocket and go and buy yourself a V8 67. But it ain't going to do 370 miles on an electric charge, is it? So it is a different territory entirely.
No.
not that I've aspired for one of those yet, but yeah, maybe one.
Well, it sounds like you've been doing a bit of research there, Phil.
I do like me Shelby 500 Mustang. Yeah. So yeah, one day, Curtis. I won't be able to go anywhere. I won't be able to go anywhere in it. I won't be able to go into any city centres in it and things like that. But that's not the point, is it? But fantastic. So again, very brief this week. Great interview, as I say, last week with Stuart Foltz from Trust Ford there. If you do get a chance, you've not listened to that interview and you want to know more about what's happening in the Ford network, particularly in the UK, then head over and tune into at least the first 10 minutes of the podcast last week. Very, very insightful and great interview there with Stuart. And I think we, again, this week, great results from Cambria, demonstration that actually looking at their portfolio and brand representation does pay dividends. They've done very well out of that. And again, we started to see the outcome of the VW restructuring and realignment of their partners as well in the UK and what they're doing. So again, quite a short week for us in terms of headlines, but plenty packed in there, isn't there?
Yeah. A busy old week. So we'll be back next week. But in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to Motor Trade Radio podcast on Spotify. Where else we? iTunes, YouTube, Deezer, SoundCloud. Was it?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're all over the place.
We're all over.
But the main thing is, if you like and enjoy the show, then do talk about it on social media and get the word out there.
And again, say it every week, if you want to come on, interview like we did with Stuart and others in the past, then please get in touch. I'm more than happy to get you on and share some insight and some thoughts around what's happening in your world, your sector, your business. So look forward to hearing from you. And that's it for this week then, Curtis. We'll grab some time again next week. And until then, tune in.
Yep, thanks a lot and see you next week.